Hello, welcome to Math 263. This is the Intro to Excel video. So we're going to start. First I want to show you how to open up Excel. And that is pretty easy. You go to the Start menu, and if it's not visible here, you just type in the letters EXCL, and then it'll find the program for you and just click on it. And so you should do that and be working these problems with me, so that you can make sure that you know how to type in these functions here. So I've got 3 problems that I wanted to do, and each of these has something significant in them that you're going to want to remember. But to begin the introduction, I want you to notice that the columns in Excel are labeled with capital letters and the rows are labeled with numbers. And if you select a cell, the cell that you've selected is here and is also highlighted in yellow. So we're going to start in A1 and we're going to type in the function in number 1, which is here, and it leads us to our first issue, which is this negative x squared here. Excel does not understand this negative x squared. So what we'll do, we'll start with x in cell A1 and then hit the tab key and label this f of x. And x is your independent variable, and it's called the domain, and you always set the domain, so you get to pick what numbers you put in here. And then f of x is your function rule, and so you type the function rule in here. So let's do that first. And so the first thing you have to know about Excel is that if you want to type in a function or a rule, you have to start with the equal sign, and that tells Excel this is not text, this is a formula. The next thing, what I mentioned before, is this negative x squared. You can't just type in negative, you have to type in -1. Okay, the next thing is Excel does not understand understood multiplication, so you must type in the times, which is found above the 8, so Shift 8. And then the next thing you have to know about Excel is you don't type in the letter X, you type in the cell reference. So I've labeled column A X, and I want the X, the number that you put in for X, to come from cell A2. So I click on A2. Then I'm going to square it, and the way you square is you hit Shift and the number 6 for the caret key, and then 2. So then you have -2x, so that's -2, and again you have to type in times, and you don't type in X, you select cell A2, and then +8. And so this is the function rule or formula, and you're going to hit enter, and it's going to say 8 because it thinks that this cell has 0 in it. Okay, now what you're going to do is set your domain, and so I'll start with some negative numbers, maybe -6, and then hit enter. And then if I want Excel to automatically count by 2s, it defaults to count by 1s, but if I wanted to count by 2s, I'll type in -4. Okay, now I want to teach you the difference between selecting and dragging. I want to select the cells with -6 and -4 in it. So I'm going to click on the -6, and I have a white crosshair, and I'm just going to hit my left mouse key and drag down, and that light blue tells me I have selected the cells A2 and A3. Now I want to drag that information down, so I'm going to go to this black square here and make sure my cursor turns to black, or my crosshair, and I'm going to select with the left mouse key, and I'm going to drag down, and it knows, since I selected those two, to count by 2s. So now I want to drag this formula down. So I have clicked on cell B2, and I want to go to that fill tool and make sure my cursor turns black and hit the left mouse button and drag that down. And so what it has done is it was A2. When I dragged it down, it became A3, and it substituted -4 in because -4 is in cell A3. And I dragged down again, it became A4, and it substituted -2 in. So that's why you don't use X, you use the cell references. Okay, next thing we want to do is we want to graph this. So I'm going to select cell A1, hold down the mouse button, the left mouse key, and go to the right, and then go down, and I have selected all of those, and I'm going to click on Insert, and scatter, and I always choose scatter with markers only, and there is my graph. Now if I don't like the looks of my graph, I can take time to think about, oh, I don't need all these values, so I'm going to go from 16 to 20 and I'm going to delete those values, and it'll also correct the graph. So that's problem 1. Okay, problem 2 is P of Q equals 3e to the 5q. I've changed the letters. My independent variable is Q, my dependent variable is P, and so I'm going to label cell A18Q and then cell B18P parentheses Q. And so my domain, my independent variables would be at Q, and I'm going to type in the formula 3e to the 5q. So remember, we lead with the equal sign. So we have 3, we have to type in times. And then e is a special function. It's the natural number e. And so Excel knows about this. And so you don't use the letter e, you use exp. And so it's a function, so the way that you type it in is different. It's been programmed differently. You do not use a caret key. You just use parentheses, and you tell Excel my exponent is 5q. So you type in 5 times, and remember, no q, you use the cell reference. So I'm going to click on A19, and now Excel knows 3e to the 5q is the function. I'm going to type in some values here. Again, it defaults to count by ones, so I'll let you see that. And then notice that my dependent variables, my y values, got very large very quickly. So we can edit that. Our domain we can change it. We can, instead of going from 0 to 1, we could go to 0 to 0.1. And again, if I select 0 and 0.1, it'll know to count by 0.1s. And so then I can graph it. It'll give me a good graph. And there it is. Okay, so problem 3, there's a lot going on in problem 3. It is d of p, so p would be my independent variable, and d of p would be my dependent variable. And I'll wait on my domain. I'm going to type in my function, and there's a lot going on here. So the first thing is the square root. The square root is a command that you need to memorize, and it's sqrt. And then 2p squared minus 3 is, all of that is underneath the square root, so you would need parentheses, 2 times, click on cell A34, raise that with the caret key to a power of 2 minus 3, then close the parentheses. Okay, so the first thing, square root command. Second thing, I'm going to take my time here and explain. This is very important. See, this function has this horizontal division key. That horizontal division key is a grouping symbol. It is a grouping symbol. So it means that you have to do everything in the numerator, calculate that down to one value, do everything in the denominator, calculate that down to one denominator, and then divide. But Excel does not have a horizontal division key. It has a sideways slash division key. It's just the regular division key, which is a problem because it's not a grouping symbol. So I didn't have to put parentheses in the numerator because I knew that parentheses was going to happen when I did square root. So the square root's a grouping symbol. But see this denominator here, see this plus 5? If you don't use a grouping symbol, it's not going to do 3 times the natural log of 2p plus 5 first. So you have to get used to grouping your numerator and denominator with parentheses. It's a very common error. So I have to type in a parentheses, then 3, then times, and then this leads us to the third thing in this problem, which is the natural log. How do you type in the natural log? People mess this up because I don't understand what a natural log is. This is the natural log of 2p, not the natural log times 2p. So when you type it in Excel, you just type in the letter L and the letter N and then parentheses 2 times P, which is A34, close the parentheses, plus 5, and then you're done with your denominator, so you close the denominator. And notice how it color codes it for you. You have this parentheses in black telling me that this is my denominator that needs to be calculated first, and this parentheses in green telling me that this is my natural log number inside the natural log. And so you can see it's color coded there, and that's helpful if you miss a parentheses. Okay, now we're going to hit enter. And you think you messed up? Well, it says number, and that's because it thinks it's a 0 in this column here. And so remember, 2 times 0, if I put 0 here, 2 times 0 is 0, and the natural log of 0 does not exist, because remember, the natural log has to, the number here has to be greater than 0. That's okay. All you have to do is just pick another number, like 1, and then that's another problem. This is a really interesting problem. Okay, so why would that be a problem? Well, if you look up here in the numerator, if you put 1 up here in the numerator, you get 2 times 1 minus 3 is negative 1. You can't have a negative under the denominator. So Excel just won't do things that are not defined. So let's try 2. So if we start counting at 2, then we're good. So we'll start at 2, and let's select these two and then drag it down. And we've got these values here. So don't panic if you see number here. It just means that you need to change your domain, and you have complete control over this domain. You have to figure out what is going to be okay for Excel. And then you graph it, and there is your graph. So now we can graph it. So we will select the values in the A column and the B column. We're in Insert, Scatter, Scatter with only markers, and there's our function that's a combination square root over a natural log function. And that's my 3 examples. You have a page called Functions in Excel in your lab manual, where you have 8 functions that you should type in and practice and graph them, and make sure that you are proficient in entering functions in. Good luck.